Think about the last time you lost someone. Maybe a grandparent, a friend, even a pet. That moment when you realized they were gone, and you had no idea what to do next. That feeling is older than language, older than memory itself. Most people assume ancient humans were too busy surviving to grieve. That death was just part of the routine. Another body in the dirt. That mourning is a luxury of civilization, something that came later with religion and cities and time to spare. That assumption is wrong, profoundly wrong. For 300,000 years, before churches, before graveyards, before funeral homes, ancient humans were already doing something remarkable when one of their own died. Something that looked unmistakably like grief. And what they did challenges everything we think we know about death, mourning, and what it means to be human. Because the way you grieve today isn't something civilization taught you. It's something far older than that. To understand this, you have to understand something about how evolution works. Evolution doesn't keep things around unless they serve a purpose. Every instinct, every behavior that persists across hundreds of thousands of years has to earn its place. And yet, across every culture ever discovered, humans have always stopped to mourn their dead. They've always marked the moment, always done something. The question is why? Why would a species fighting daily for survival against predators, starvation, disease, stop everything and grieve? The oldest evidence comes from a cave in Iraq. In 1960, archaeologist Ralph Seletsky excavated Shanidar Cave and found something that stopped the scientific community cold. A Neanderthal burial, estimated at 65,000 years old, surrounded by the pollen of wildflowers. Yarrow, groundsel, grape hyacinth, and hollyhock, flowers that had to be deliberately gathered and placed around the body. Someone 65,000 years ago had picked flowers for a person they had lost. The discovery was immediately controversial. Some argued the pollen could have arrived by wind or burrowing animals. But Seletsky's finding triggered a wave of re-examination, because it wasn't the only one. But here's what makes this even stranger. In 2023, archaeologist Lee Berger and a team from the University of the Witwatersrand announced a discovery in a rising star cave system in South Africa that rewrote the timeline entirely. They found the burials of Homo naledi, a small-brained, primitive cousin of ours, in chambers so deep underground that reaching them required crawling through passages barely 25 centimeters wide. The team concluded that Homo naledi had deliberately carried their dead into the darkness and placed them there. This was 300,000 years ago, before Homo sapiens even existed as a species. The counterintuitive conclusion was staggering. Intentional burial didn't begin with modern humans. It began with a species whose brain was a third of the size of ours. Grief, or something like it, may be older than intelligence itself. Cross-cultural evidence makes this even harder to dismiss. Archaeologist Paul Pettit at Durham University spent years cataloging burial practices across ancient human sites worldwide. His conclusion: across every continent where ancient humans lived, death triggered the same pattern. Bodies were treated with care, given objects, often marked with red ochre, a mineral pigment that meant something significant enough to carry for miles. In the Kafsa Cave in Israel, 100,000-year-old burials contained shells from the Mediterranean coast. 35 miles away, someone walked 35 miles to collect shells for a person who had died. Not for tools, not for food, for a grave. Psychologist George Bonanno at Columbia University has spent his career studying how humans grieve across vastly different cultures, from rural Indonesia to urban America to isolated communities in Papua New Guinea. His research, published in Psychological Science, appended a field. The basic pattern of grief, the initial shock, the waves of sadness, the gradual adaptation, appears in every culture ever studied. No two cultures grieve identically, but every single one grieves. So why did death trigger ritual? Evolutionary biologists have a compelling theory. Grief may have evolved as social glue. When a member of a small tribe died, the group was weakened, physically and psychologically. Grief forced the survivors to stop, to acknowledge the loss together, to redistribute roles, to bond tighter against whatever had taken one of their own. The ritual wasn't only for the dead. It was for the living. The word funeral itself carries a memory of ancient darkness. It comes from the Latin funis, meaning a torchlit procession through the night. Even our word for it remembers fire and darkness and the long walk to wherever the dead were taken, which raises an uncomfortable question about how we grieve today. We've built entire industries around making death efficient. Funeral homes, grief counselors, designated mourning periods. In many modern cultures, you're expected to be functional within weeks. But what if that timeline isn't natural at all? What if your nervous system is still running 300,000-year-old software, built for slow communal ritual, for gathering the entire tribe, for returning to the place of loss again and again? What if the reason modern grief feels so brutal and so isolating is that we're grieving alone, quickly, and in private, in exactly the condition ancient humans never experienced loss? For 300,000 years, your ancestors stopped when someone died. They gathered. They placed flowers and shells and ochre. They carried their dead into deep caves by torchlight. They walked 35 miles for a single shell to place beside a body. They didn't have words for what they felt, but they always knew what to do with it. Grief didn't begin with civilization. Civilization began with grief.